Silas, who had woken up on the steps when the curfew bells had tolled, had decamped to a large armchair by the roaring fire in the front of the bar. From there, he had been warming his feet with the flames and his nose with the whiskey ever since. There are usually people who are prepared to pay for stories with liquor, and Silas had plenty to tell and, consequentially, also to drink. He was considering retiring when one of his companions stood up facing the large bay windows, stretched his arms up, and froze.
"Blimey, you don't see many of those to the pound."
"Many of what?" yawned Silas lazily, checking that his glass was indeed empty.
"There's half a dozen mounted cherry reds outside."
"Really?" said the barman with a fleeting look of panic, immediately dropped 2 or 3 unseen items into the top of a cider barrel on the bar. Clocking this nervous gesture, Silas sat bolt upright and said quietly, "Half a dozen what?"
"Cherry reds," said Avery. "Frisian army guards."
Silas's eyes widened considerably, but he didn't move. "Oh, right, of course," he said, trying to hold his voice steady. "I suppose you get a lot of Frisian guards out this way, don't you?"
"Nah," said Avery, letting out a loud belch. "Only when they're looking for someone or something. On the trail of a squealer, probably. Kent'll be annoyed. He hates opening the gate for cherries."
As he said the final word, the door of the bar burst open, and a little too hastily, the barkeep barked, "Sorry, gents, we're closed," in a tone that suggested no actual intention to apologize. Avery turned back to his new friend, certain that he would be as entertained by what might be about to happen, only to find the seat by the fireplace empty. Silas wasn't given to panicking. Actually, that wasn't true. Silas wasn't given to panicking when it mattered. The rest of the time, he could panic with the best of them. Right now, his brain was moving at about half the speed of time, which gave it far more thinking space. But if those guards had a picture of him, then he was done for. The Frisians paid quite well for positive identifications, and any one of the bar patrons would happily sell him for a drink. He had no illusions about that. If he was going to hide somewhere in this hotel, it was going to have to be somewhere very ingenious. A chimney, maybe. He'd done that before, although not during the winter. It had been the height of summer when none of the fires had been lit, and there was no risk of them being lit either. Perhaps he could climb down into the woodshed or the hayloft if he could get across the courtyard without getting grabbed. Or if he could find a costume, there was always the option of disguise. Lots of shouting echoed up the stairs. It was the kind of shouting that is done by self-important military men who are going to get an earful or possibly a court-martial if things don't go their way, and quickly. As Silas set foot on the first step of the next flight of stairs, he heard a voice demand, "Which way did he go?" so loudly that it must have come from inside the building, and the sound of 3 sets of heavy boots heading this way. There was nothing for it. Finding a maid's outfit, wriggling into it, and passing himself off as housekeeping was a great plan, but he didn't have time to open all the doors on each corridor until he found the linen stores. He was going to have to take a far less subtle route. One more flight up to where the rooms were the very grandest and had balconies, and hope that he counted correctly. The soldiers may have been military trained, but Silas had several advantages when it came to speed, not least that he was very small and very scared. He cleared the final flight with unbelievable haste and began to count the doors on the long corridor. By his calculations, the 5th from the far end should put him exactly where he wanted to be. He braced himself to shoulder the door open, hoping it wasn't dead-bolted, and took a run up. At that moment, the door opened, and he went flying past a very bemused young man who had opened his door in order to assess the cause of the commotion on the stairs. Silas didn't register the face as familiar until the gentleman said in a slightly indignant voice,
"Silas, is it you making that noise?"